My name is Lily. I was 13 years old when I learned that money can exist without ever reaching the place it's meant to go. My parents had been divorced for 3 years by then. My dad didn't live with us anymore, but once a month, like clockwork, he sent child support. I knew that much because my mom liked to remind me of it whenever I asked for anything. Your father sends money, she'd say, but money disappears fast. At the time, I believed her. Our apartment was small and always a little too quiet. Most days, when I opened it, there wasn't much inside. Half a gallon of milk, sometimes expired, a bottle of ketchup, maybe a few eggs if we were lucky. The freezer held ice trays and nothing else. Mom always said we'd go grocery shopping soon. Next week, she'd promise, after I get paid. Once things settle down. Things never settled. By the time I turned 13, skipping meals had become normal. I stopped eating breakfast because it was easier to tell myself I wasn't hungry than to ask for food that wasn't there. At school, I ate slowly, stretching out lunch as long as possible, chewing each bite like it needed to last me until the next day. When friends offered snacks, I said no. Not because I didn't want them, but because I didn't want questions. At home, I learned how to make hunger quiet. A glass of water. A piece of toast cut in half. Ramen without the seasoning packet so it wouldn't run out too fast. I told myself this was temporary, that my mom was doing her best. She didn't look like someone who was struggling. Her nails were always done. Her phone was new. She ordered takeout for herself sometimes, late at night, after I said I wasn't hungry. She said adults needed real food to function. Kids, apparently, could get by on less. Whenever I asked about the child support money, she sighed dramatically, like I was asking something unreasonable. Lily, that money doesn't go far, she said once, scrolling through her phone while I stood in the doorway. Rent, bills, gas, it's gone before you know it. I nodded. I always nodded. I didn't know how much my dad sent. I didn't know what it was supposed to cover. I just knew that my stomach hurt most nights, and that asking for food made my mom irritated in a way that felt dangerous. Then one Friday afternoon, everything shifted. I got home from school early and sat on the couch with my backpack still on. I hadn't eaten lunch because the cafeteria ran out of pizza, and I didn't like the alternative. My head felt light, the way it did when I stood up too fast. I opened my phone to distract myself and scrolled through social media without thinking. That's when I saw the photo. My mom, standing barefoot on a beach I'd never been to. The ocean behind her. Sunlight on her face. A drink in her hand with a little umbrella sticking out of it. The caption read, "Finally making memories." I stared at the screen, confused at first. Then I scrolled. Another photo. A hotel balcony. A sunset. Her smiling again, relaxed, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. I locked my phone and sat there in the quiet apartment, the refrigerator humming behind me. That night, I ate 2 slices of plain bread for dinner. No butter, no explanation. Just bread and water, and the image of my mom's beach photos burned into my head. She came home late, sunburned, happy. She talked about the trip like it was nothing special, just something she deserved. I didn't say anything. I didn't accuse her. I didn't ask questions. But something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wondered where the child support money had actually gone, and why it never seemed to find its way to the grocery store. That was the night I realized my hunger wasn't an accident. It was a choice someone else was making for me. After I saw the beach photos, nothing changed on the surface. That was the part that scared me the most. Mom didn't suddenly come home with groceries. She didn't notice that I was quieter or that my clothes were starting to hang a little looser on me. She didn't ask if I'd eaten. Life just kept moving forward like it always had. Only now I couldn't stop noticing the pattern. Hunger stopped feeling like a problem to solve. It became something to manage. I learned which days at school had the biggest lunches. Pizza day meant I could get through the evening without my stomach hurting too badly. Soup day meant I needed to drink more water to fill the space. I started saving the little packets of crackers they handed out sometimes and hiding them in my backpack like they were important documents. At home, the kitchen felt smaller every day. I'd open the fridge even when I already knew what was inside, just to double check. Milk, ketchup, a single apple that Mom said was hers. The light inside the fridge always felt too bright for how empty it was. When Mom noticed me standing there, she'd sigh. "You're always looking for food," she said once. "You just ate." I hadn't. But arguing took energy, and hunger already used up most of what I had. Some nights, Mom came home with coffee in her hand or a small shopping bag from a store I recognized. Not groceries, clothes, makeup, things that made her smile. She'd set them on the counter and talk about how hard she worked, how stressed she was, how she deserved something nice once in a while. I nodded and listened, my stomach tight, telling myself adults understood things kids didn't. On weekends, it was worse. No school lunch meant I had to plan ahead. I'd wake up late so I wouldn't feel hungry right away. I'd clean the apartment slowly, stretching time, hoping Mom would say we were going shopping. She rarely did. Once, I asked directly. My voice came out small even to me. "Can we get groceries today?" She looked at me like I'd asked for something extravagant. "Not right now," she said. "Money's tight." Later that same afternoon, she ordered food delivery for herself. I watched the driver hand her the bag. The smell filled the apartment. She ate in the living room while watching TV and asked if I wanted some. "There's not much," she added before I could answer. I said no. I started telling myself stories to make it easier, that this was temporary, that she was doing her best, that the child support money must really be that small. I pictured it disappearing into bills I didn't understand, numbers too big for me to imagine. What I didn't picture was the beach. At school, my friends talked about snacks, about dinners their parents made, about complaining when there was nothing to eat, even though their fridges were full. I laughed along and stayed quiet. I didn't want to be the girl with the weird home life. One afternoon, a teacher asked me why I was always tired. I shrugged and said I was staying up too late. It was easier than explaining that hunger makes it hard to sleep. By the second week, my body started changing in ways I couldn't ignore. I got dizzy when I stood up too fast. My hands shook sometimes. I told myself to slow down, to breathe, to be careful. Careful became my default setting. I started carrying change in my pocket just in case I needed to buy something small, a granola bar, a banana, something to take the edge off. I counted coins like they mattered more than anything else. At home, Mom talked about her trip again, scrolling through photos and laughing at comments from friends. Someone had written, "You deserve this," and she liked it. I watched from the hallway, unseen, and felt something hard settle in my chest. This wasn't about not having enough. This was about priorities. The child support money wasn't stretched thin. It wasn't disappearing mysteriously. It was being redirected, away from me, toward a life where my mom could escape for a few days and come back glowing while I counted crackers and told myself I wasn't hungry. That was when skipping meals stopped feeling temporary. It felt permanent. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if someone else knew. Not because I wanted to get my mom in trouble, but because I was starting to understand something important. If I kept staying quiet, nothing was going to change. I tried to stop looking at my mom's social media after that. I really did. But it's hard not to stare at something when it feels like proof of a truth you're not ready to accept yet. Every time I opened my phone, the images were still there, waiting for me. Bright blue water, white sand, her smiling face, relaxed and carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked happy. I looked hungry. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, I sat on the edge of my bed and scrolled again. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to understand. The comments were worse than the photos. "You deserve this. So proud of you for taking time for yourself. living your best life. I wondered if any of them knew what our fridge looked like. If any of them knew that the night before, I'd gone to bed with my stomach aching because I'd decided to save the last packet of noodles for the next day. Probably not. People only see what you post. That night, I made myself half a bowl of cereal. I measured it carefully, shaking the box until the flakes settled so it looked fuller than it really was. I sat at the table, eating slowly, while my mom laughed on the phone in the other room, telling someone about the ocean breeze and the hotel breakfast buffet. I chewed and listened. She talked about unlimited food, about how nice it was not to cook, about waking up to fresh fruit and pastries every morning. I swallowed hard and finished my cereal, then rinsed the bowl like it had held something precious. Later, when she hung up, she walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. She frowned at the empty shelves, then closed it again. "We really need to go shopping soon," she said casually. I looked at her, standing there in her beach-tan skin, her hair still lighter from the sun, and something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not in anger, but in clarity. "You had money to go on vacation," I said quietly. She turned toward me, surprised. "What?" "The trip," I continued, my voice steady even though my hands weren't. "Dad sent child support, and you went on vacation." Her expression changed immediately, defensive, annoyed. "That money didn't even cover the whole trip," she said. "And don't start with this. You're too young to understand how finances work." I nodded, the way I always did. But this time, it wasn't because I believed her. It was because I was listening carefully. Later that night, I went back to my room and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The beach photos, the comments, the empty fridge. The way she talked about money like it was both scarce and somehow always available for the things she wanted. That was when the realization fully settled in. My hunger wasn't a side effect of being poor, it was the cost of someone else's comfort. The money meant to feed me had been turned into memories I wasn't part of. Photos I couldn't afford. Smiles that didn't include me. I didn't cry that night. Crying felt useless. Instead, I started paying attention. I noticed when my dad's support payment usually arrived. I noticed when groceries didn't. I noticed how often my mom talked about being stressed but still found ways to treat herself. For the first time, I stopped assuming she didn't know what she was doing. She knew. And that knowledge changed everything. Because once you understand that an adult is making a choice, choosing themselves over your basic needs, you stop feeling confused. You start feeling awake. I didn't confront my mom right away. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to be sure. There's a difference between suspicion and certainty, and I needed the second one. I needed to hear it from her, in her own words, without accusations or raised voices that she could later twist into me being dramatic. So I waited. A few days later, we were sitting at the small kitchen table. It was early evening. The light outside was fading, and the apartment felt hollow in that familiar way it did before night settled in. I was doing homework, pretending to focus, while she scrolled on her phone. My stomach hurt, again. "Mom?" I said casually, like I was asking about the weather. "Yeah," she replied without looking up. "Did Dad send the child support this month?" She sighed, long and heavy, like I had asked something exhausting. "Yes, Lily, he did." I waited. "So, can we go grocery shopping?" That's when she finally looked at me. Her face didn't soften, it tightened. "You're always worried about food," she said. "You act like we're starving." I stared at her, surprised by how calm I felt. "We kind of are." She laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "No, we're not. You're fed. You're fine." I hesitated, then asked the question I'd been holding in for days. "Then how did you afford the trip?" Her expression changed instantly. Not confusion, not guilt, irritation. "That's none of your business," she snapped. Then, like she realized how harsh that sounded, she added, "Adults make choices. You'll understand when you're older." I swallowed. "But that money is for me, for food." She shook her head like I was missing something obvious. Money doesn't last, Lily. You spend it on groceries and it's gone in a week. At least memories stay with you. I stared at her. Memories matter, she continued, her voice firm now. Groceries don't last. The words landed between us, heavy and undeniable. For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard her. If she would correct herself. If she would realize what she'd just said and soften it somehow. She didn't. She went back to her phone like the conversation was over. I sat there, frozen, replaying the sentence in my head. Memories matter more than groceries. I thought about the beach photos, the hotel breakfast buffet she had talked about, the way she smiled in every picture. Then I thought about the empty fridge, the half bowls of cereal, the nights I went to bed early so I wouldn't feel hungry for as long. That was the moment it finally clicked. She wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't struggling. She had made a decision. And that decision was that her happiness mattered more than my basic needs. I didn't argue with her. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my homework and went to my room, closing the door quietly behind me. But something inside me had shifted permanently. For years, I had assumed that adults always tried their best. That if something went wrong, it was because life was hard, not because someone had chosen wrongly. That belief had protected me from the truth. Now it was gone. I sat on my bed and looked around my room. The clothes I'd outgrown, the shoes with worn soles, the posters taped to the wall because we didn't have frames. None of it felt accidental anymore. That night, instead of trying to distract myself, I took out a notebook from my backpack. It was mostly empty, the first few pages filled with old school notes I didn't need anymore. On the next blank page, I wrote one word at the top: evidence. I didn't know exactly what I would do with it yet. I just knew I needed a place to put the truth. Somewhere it couldn't be dismissed or rewritten later. Under the word, I wrote the date. Then I wrote what she had said. Memories matter. Groceries don't last. Seeing it on paper made my chest tighten. It looked worse written down. More real. That was the moment I stopped asking myself if I was overreacting. I wasn't. I was hungry in a house where money had been spent on a vacation. I was a child being told that food was temporary, but fun was essential. And once you hear something like that from the person who is supposed to protect you, you don't forget it. You start watching. You start remembering. You start preparing for the day someone finally asks the right questions. That night, I went to bed with my stomach empty again. But for the first time, my head was clear. After that night, I stopped asking my mom for things. Not because I didn't need them, but because I didn't need her answers anymore. I had heard the truth. Now my job was to remember it. At first, paying attention felt strange, like I was doing something wrong just by noticing. I wasn't spying. I wasn't snooping through her phone or digging through her bag. I was just observing the same life I had already been living. Only this time, I wasn't filling in the gaps with excuses for her. I started with dates. I knew roughly when my dad sent the child support each month. It was usually the first week. I didn't know the exact amount, but I knew it came consistently. So when the first week passed and our fridge stayed empty, I wrote it down. Week 1, payment arrived, no groceries. I took pictures of the fridge when my mom wasn't home, not for drama, not to show anyone yet, just to capture what was actually there, or more accurately, what wasn't. Milk, ketchup, nothing else. I took pictures of the pantry too, an open box of cereal. 2 cans of soup she said were for emergencies. I didn't touch them, I just documented them. At school, I started noticing how often I felt weak, how my hands shook during tests, how I got headaches by the afternoon. I wrote that down too. Skipped breakfast, ate lunch, dizzy by last period. Writing things down made them harder to ignore. It also made me feel less crazy. When you're hungry long enough, you start to doubt yourself. You wonder if you're being dramatic, if you're exaggerating, if this is just how everyone lives and you're the one who can't handle it. The notebook didn't argue back. It just told the truth. At home, my mom continued living the same way she always had. She talked about her trip again. She planned another weekend away with friends. She bought a new swimsuit even though summer was almost over. She complained about bills and stress and how no one ever helped her. I listened quietly. One afternoon, she came home with shopping bags and set them on the table. For a moment, my chest lifted. Maybe she had finally gone grocery shopping. She hadn't. The bags held clothes, makeup, a candle that smelled like coconut and something called Ocean Breeze. She lit it right there in the kitchen, smiling. "It reminds me of the beach," she said. I nodded and went to my room. That night, I added another page. Bought non-essential items, no food purchased. I started paying attention at school, too. I realized how often teachers asked if I was okay. How often the nurse offered me crackers. How many times friends noticed I wasn't eating. I used to brush it off. Now I filed it away. I wasn't planning anything yet. I wasn't thinking about reporting her, or telling on her, or getting her in trouble. I was just preparing for the possibility that one day, someone might finally ask the right question. And if they did, I didn't want to freeze. I didn't want to forget details. I didn't want to sound unsure. I wanted facts. One evening, my dad called. That was rare. He usually texted. I answered quickly, heart racing for reasons I couldn't fully explain. "How's school?" he asked. "It's okay," I said. "How's everything at home?" I hesitated. Just for a second. Then I answered the way I always had. "Fine." After we hung up, I sat on my bed and stared at my notebook. I didn't feel brave enough to tell him yet, but I wrote the call down. Dad called. I said I was fine. Seeing it on paper made my stomach twist. It felt like a lie I was storing instead of telling. As the weeks went on, something else changed. I stopped feeling guilty. I used to think needing food made me ungrateful. That wanting more meant I didn't appreciate what my mom did. That questioning her choices made me a bad daughter. Now I understood something different. Children don't owe their parents silence in exchange for survival. The notebook grew thicker. More dates. More notes. More pictures. I kept it hidden under my mattress, wrapped in an old sweatshirt so it wouldn't be found accidentally. It wasn't a diary, it was a record. I didn't know when I would need it. I just knew that if someone ever tried to say I was exaggerating or confused or misremembering things, I would have proof. Not opinions, not feelings. Proof. And once you start collecting the truth like that, something changes inside you. You stop feeling small. You stop feeling helpless. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You start preparing to be believed. It didn't happen all at once. There was no big reveal or dramatic moment where someone burst into our apartment and demanded answers. It started with a question, a small one. "Did you eat breakfast today?" It came from my homeroom teacher. She asked it casually, the way adults do when they aren't expecting a real answer. I almost said yes out of habit, almost smiled and nodded like everything was fine. But that morning, my stomach hurt so badly it was hard to focus. I hadn't eaten since lunch the day before. I was tired of lying. "No," I said. She paused, looked at me more closely. "Did you eat dinner last night?" I hesitated. Then I shook my head. She didn't scold me. She didn't panic. She just pulled a granola bar out of her desk drawer and slid it across to me like it was no big deal. "Eat this," she said gently, "and come see me after class." I ate the granola bar slowly, my hands shaking. Not from hunger this time, but from fear. Because something told me this wasn't going to stay small. After class, she walked me to the counselor's office. I sat in a chair that was a little too big for me, staring at a poster about stress management while the counselor asked questions in a calm, careful voice. "How often do you miss meals at home? Is there food in your fridge? Who handles groceries in your house?" I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I answered honestly, but simply. I didn't accuse my mom. I didn't bring up the vacation or the child support. I just described what my days look like. By the end, the counselor's face had changed. Not shocked, concerned. "We're going to make sure you're okay," she said. "You did the right thing by answering honestly." That afternoon, she called my dad. I didn't know she was going to do that. When she told me, my chest tightened. I imagined him being angry. I imagined my mom finding out and screaming at me. I imagined everything blowing up. Instead, my dad showed up at the school the next day. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. When he saw me, he hugged me longer than usual. He didn't ask questions right away. He just asked if I was hungry. We went to a small diner near the school. I ordered carefully out of habit, then stopped myself. He noticed. "You can eat," he said quietly. "I've got it." While I ate, he listened. Not like an adult waiting to correct me, like someone who was finally paying attention. I told him about the empty fridge, the skipped meals, the beach photos, the sentence my mom had said about memories and groceries. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't cry. I told it the way I had written it down, fact by fact. When I finished, he sat back and rubbed his face with both hands. "That money was for you," he said. His voice was tight. "For food. For basics. Not vacations." Within days, things started moving faster than I expected. There were phone calls, meetings, paperwork. A woman from Child Services came to our apartment to check in. She looked inside the fridge, inside the pantry. She asked my mom questions I had never heard anyone ask her before. My mom laughed at first, tried to charm her way through it, talked about how hard single parenting was, about stress, about how teenagers exaggerate. The woman listened politely, then she took notes. When my mom realized this wasn't going away, she turned on me. "You embarrassed me," she hissed that night. "You made me look like a bad mother." I didn't answer, because for the first time, someone else had already seen what I lived with every day. I didn't need to defend the truth anymore. The child support arrangement changed after that. The money didn't go straight to her anymore. Some of it went directly toward food assistance. Some of it was monitored. Suddenly, groceries appeared in our apartment regularly. Not because my mom had changed, because someone was watching. The silence in the apartment became heavier. She stopped talking about memories. She stopped posting photos. She stopped pretending everything was fine. One night, as I unpacked groceries with food stamps the caseworker had helped set up, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. I hadn't gotten my mom in trouble. I hadn't betrayed her. I had stopped covering for her. And when adults finally looked, really looked, they didn't see a dramatic kid or a misunderstanding. They saw a hungry child. After the adults stepped in, life didn't suddenly become warm and perfect. It became quieter, more structured, watched. Groceries started showing up regularly after that. Real groceries. Milk that wasn't expired. Bread that didn't need to be rationed. Fruit I didn't have to count before eating. The fridge stopped humming so loudly because it was finally doing its job. The child support money didn't disappear anymore. It went where it was always supposed to go, to me. The first time I made myself a full sandwich without checking how much was left, I froze halfway through. My hands hovered over the counter like I was doing something wrong. Old habits don't leave quietly. Hunger teaches you to apologize for existing. I finished the sandwich anyway. My mom changed too, but not in the way people like to imagine. She didn't suddenly become nurturing or remorseful. She became careful. She stopped talking about money around me. She stopped posting online. She stopped saying things like, "Memories matter more than groceries." Not because she had learned something, but because she knew someone else was listening now. She told people I had misunderstood, that I was sensitive, that things had been blown out of proportion. I didn't correct her. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. The system didn't care about her version. It cared about patterns. And patterns don't lie. At school, teachers checked in more often. The counselor made sure I had access to meals. My dad called regularly, not just to ask how school was going, but to ask how I was doing. When I said I was okay, this time it was true. The notebook stayed under my mattress for a while longer. I didn't add to it anymore, but I didn't throw it away either. It wasn't something to erase, it was something to remember, because childhood doesn't last forever. But the effects of being I. One evening, months later, my mom stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge. It was full. She sighed, like it bothered her. "You know," she said, "you didn't have to make such a big deal out of everything." I looked at her, really looked. The woman who had chosen beaches over basics, photos over food, applause over responsibility. "I didn't," I said calmly. "I was just hungry." She didn't reply. That was the last time we talked about it. I learned something important from all of this. Something no one teaches you directly. Money meant for a child isn't a bonus. It isn't a suggestion. It's not flexible. It's protection. And when someone takes that protection away and calls it self-care, that's not sacrifice. That's neglect dressed up in pretty language. My mom said groceries don't last. She was right about one thing. Neither does childhood. You don't get a second chance to feed it properly. You don't get to rewrite the nights a kid goes to bed hungry while you're somewhere warm and celebrated. You don't get to turn memories into an excuse and expect the damage not to follow. What stayed with me wasn't the hunger itself. It was the lesson that sometimes the bravest thing a kid can do isn't forgive. It's tell the truth and stop protecting the people who won't protect them. So if you ever wonder whether small choices matter, whether groceries are worth more than photos, whether responsibility matters more than appearances, remember this. I skipped meals for weeks. She posted beach photos. And when someone finally asked where the money went, the answer mattered more than any memory ever could.